Police are to be given greater powers to restrict protests by allowing them to consider the cumulative impact of repeated demonstrations. The measures follow pro-Palestinian demonstrations, including an event in London on Saturday, which saw almost 500 arrests. Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood said repeated large-scale protests had caused considerable fear for the Jewish community. The government will amend the Section 12 and 14 of the Public Order Act of 1986 to explicitly allow the police to take account of the cumulative impact of frequent protests on local areas, in order to impose conditions on public possessions and assemblies. Also on News at 10 tonight. The Jewish community are shocked but not surprised as the terror attack on a synagogue which killed 2 men and injured 3 others, members have said. It comes as mourners in Manchester pay tribute to victim Melvin Kravitz at his funeral. The 66-year-old from Crumsall held prevent Jihad Shami from entering the Heaton Park Hebrew Congregation Synagogue as the attack unfolded on Thursday. Also, a suspected arson attack on a mosque in the seaside town has been condemned as disgusting. Police are treating the fire, which damaged the front entrance of the mosque and a car in Peacehaven, East Sussex, as hate crime. And rescuers from North Yorkshire were among more than 100 volunteers who spent 36 hours saving cavers stranded underground. The rescue of 3 men began on Thursday at around 9 p.m. and only finished at around 7:45 a.m. Saturday, 4th of October, in the middle of Storm Amy. Men had already spent 18 hours underground before the rescue began after they got into difficulty getting out.
This is STV News at 10 with Mark Austin.
Good evening. Police are to be given greater powers to restrict protests by allowing them to consider the cumulative impact of repeated demonstrations. The measures follow frequent pro-Palestinian demonstrations, including an event in London on Saturday, which saw almost 500 arrests. Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood said repeated large-scale protests had caused considerable fear for the Jewish community. The government will amend Sections 12 and 14 of the Public Order Act Act 1986 to explicitly allow the police to take account of the cumulative impact of frequent protests on local areas, in order to impose conditions on public possessions and assemblies. The Home Secretary will also review existing legislation to ensure powers are sufficient and are being applied consistently by police forces. This will include powers to ban protests outright. But as Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood said repeated large-scale protests had caused considerable fear for the Jewish community, Neil Connery has all the latest.
Yesterday's protests in London against Palestine Action being made a prescribed terror organisation saw more than 500 people arrested. The government says police forces will now be granted powers to put conditions on repeat protests like these, including ordering them to be held elsewhere.
When the police are placing restrictions or conditions on a protest, they are allowed to take into account cumulative disruption, that is to say the frequency of protests by particular groups and in particular places. So at the moment it's not been absolutely clear whether that is something they can take into account before they place conditions, but I will be changing the law to make it absolutely explicit.
There were also protests in Manchester yesterday. The government says it will amend 2 sections of the 1986 Public Order Act to allow police to impose conditions if needed. It will also review existing laws to make sure powers are sufficient. But organisers of yesterday's event have called the measures an extraordinary affront to democracy.
It's a fundamental right of British democracy, of any democratic, system of governance, that a government, such as the Labour government we have now, should be open to scrutiny, transparency and criticism.
In Bristol, around 100 anti-immigration protesters marched this afternoon. It's the third time in 6 weeks. They were met by counter-demonstrators as police worked hard to keep order. Repeated protests like these could find conditions being imposed under the government's changes. Neil Connery, ITV News.
The Jewish community are shocked but not surprised at the terror attack on the synagogue which killed 2 men and injured 3 others, members have said. It comes as mourners in Manchester pay tribute to victim Melvin Kravitz at his funeral. The 66-year-old from Crumpsall helped prevent Jihad al-Shami from entering the Heaton Park Hebrew Congregation synagogue as the attack unfolded on Thursday. Mourners in Manchester paid tribute to Melvin Kravitz today as Israel's Deputy Foreign Minister laid a wreath at the scene of the attack. As Amy Lewis reports.
The attack didn't just cause outrage here, but around the world. And this evening that anger was voiced outside the synagogue by an Israeli government minister who told me she's concerned about the level of anti-Semitism in the UK.
Enough is enough. Anti-Semitism is absolutely out of control in the UK. The Jewish community needs the protection of the government. They don't ask for anything else but to enforce the laws that have already exist here in the UK. Enforce the laws against racism, enforce the laws against calling for violence and murdering Jews.
Aaron says abuse towards British Jews has been increasing and it's got far worse since Thursday.
If a Jew died, it's good. Why only 2? Please, next time more. Excellent job, those who did it.
His friend Melvin Kravitz spent his final moments stopping the attacker from entering the synagogue. At his funeral today, he was remembered by those he loved and those he helped protect.
He was a warm, kind person, loved by everyone. Not just a friend for myself, but I think a friend for the community.
Get back! If you're not involved, move back!
It is 3 days since the attack in North Manchester. The cordon was removed today, meaning families can now return to their homes. Rob Cantor is one of them. The vice president of the synagogue was inside during the attack and spoke to Adrian Dorby just minutes before he was killed.
Adrian was the most wonderful man. He was a very quiet gentleman, a very, tremendous self-respect and very, very, very modest.
The attacker, Jihad al-Shami, was shot dead by police at the scene. They are still trying to unpick what happened, but the people living here say they will never understand why anyone would do this. Amy Lewis, ITV News, Manchester.
Well, a suspected arson attack on a mosque in a seaside town has been condemned as disgusting. Police are treating the fire which caused damage to the front entrance of the mosque and a car in Peacehaven, East Sussex, as a hate crime. Sussex police said they were called to reports of an arson attack in the Phyllis Avenue just before 10 p.m. on Saturday. They confirmed the incident, in which no one was injured, was being treated as a hate crime. But our STV Meridian reporter Abigail Bracken spoke to some of those affected by the attack.
2 members of Peacehaven's mosque were inside the building at the time of last night's attack, but managed to escape as flames engulfed the outside and gutted the car parked in front.
The people that came to cause harm, they tried 3 attempts to open the door. As they couldn't get in, then they just lit everything up outside. It's really, really tragic, and I just feel at the moment, it's been categorised as an arsonage attack and hate crime, but it could have been much larger. There's an ambulance centre right next door, and there's a foyer of cars here. And if you look at the wreck of the car, it could have blown up many more things around, which would have been extremely disastrous for the community.
Police say their investigation is fast moving and have just issued images showing 2 people they want to identify wearing masks approaching the front of the mosque and starting a fire. Police were called to the mosque just after 10 o'clock last night and have confirmed that they're treating the incident as a hate crime and that now they'll be putting on extra patrols around other places of worship in Sussex as a reassurance. Local leaders have condemned the attacks.
It's absolutely horrific. A clear, targeted, racist, violent act has happened here. And it's just, I'm so relieved that there were two people inside, and I'm so relieved that they were able to get out in time.
And local Muslim leaders have asked everyone to reject division, calling instead for unity and compassion. Abigail Bracken, ITV News, Peacehaven.
Well, still to come on News at 10 tonight. Caver saved by North Yorkshire rescue volunteers in a 36-hour mission during Storm Amy. Grab that story and more when we come back after this short break. Don't go away. Hello and welcome back. Tory party leader Kemi Badenoch has launched the Conservative Party conference in Manchester with an admission her party made mistakes in government. Addressing party members in the conference hall, she said, "We failed to bring numbers down and stop the boat. Let's be honest. Yes, we tried, but put simply, we didn't achieve enough." Trying her party's fortunes to migration, Badenoch promised change would take time and that her party was up for the fight. But as Kemi Badenoch says, the Conservatives are up for the fight as their annual conference got underway in Manchester today. Harry Horton was there with all his reports.
With dire poll ratings, a local elections drubbing and defections to reform, it's been a miserable first year leading the Conservatives for Kemi Badenoch. As she addressed her members today, she admitted her party had made big mistakes while in power.
We failed to bring numbers down and stop the boats. Let's be honest, that happened on our watch. Yes, we tried, but put simply, we didn't achieve enough.
Kemi Badenoch is hoping to capture attention this week with policies that swing to the right.
We must leave the ECHR and repeal the Human Rights Act.
And she insisted the Conservatives can win the next election.
Yes, we have a mountain to climb, but we have a song in our hearts, and we are up for the fight.
Kemi Badenoch said a Tory government would deport 150,000 illegal immigrants a year. But when pressed on where they would go, she struggled to answer.
I'm tired of us asking all of these irrelevant questions about where should they go. They will go back to where they should do or another country, but they should not be here.
Some Conservatives would prefer another leader to Kemi Badenoch, but her allies remain loyal.
Kemi's still the right person to turn this around for you?
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, that question is ludicrous.
Is she still the right person to turn things around?
Yes, always was, always will be. Fantastic.
And many members don't want another contest.
Yeah, I don't think there's any need for leadership elections. We've had enough of those, so...
If they do that again, I think the Conservative Party is almost dead.
One figure looms larger than all others at this conference as Conservatives celebrate 100 years of Margaret Thatcher. The party is celebrating its past, but its future is very much uncertain.
Well, this is Kemi Badenoch's first conference as party leader, but it could well be her final chance to turn things around. Yes, the Conservatives are still the official party of opposition, but things are really bad at the moment for them. Their poll ratings and electoral performance is pretty dire. We're going to see lots of policy announcements this week, a big shift to the right, but the worry among many Conservatives is that the party risks becoming irrelevant.
And finally, rescuers from North Yorkshire were among more than 100 volunteers who spent 36 hours saving cavers stranded underground. The rescue of 3 men began on Thursday at around 9 p.m. and only finished at around 7:45 a.m. on Saturday the 4th of October in the middle of Storm Amy. The men had already spent 18 hours underground before the rescue began after they got into difficulty getting out. North Yorkshire Police initially called mountain rescue teams after reports that 3 experienced cavers who had entered Dalbert Gill Passage to attempt a traverse to Dow Cave had not returned. Rescue teams from surrounding areas, including Swallowdale Mountain Rescue Team, were called to assist the Upper Warfield Fell Rescue Association due to the challenge of the task. Approximately 5.5 hours after the rescuers entered the cave system. At around 2:30 a.m. on Friday the 3rd of October, the missing cavers were located on approach to a 60-degree rift towards the Dow Cave end of the system. The time taken to locate the missing cavers meant the weather had progressively worsened and the rising water was blocking the easiest exit. This meant the rescuers and cavers had to retrace their steps. Volunteer teams at ground level endured worsening conditions to maintain communication with those underground as Storm Amy moved in, using a text message system that carries messages through solid rock. Underground teams worked in relays to bring the tired cavers back to safety, but with rising flood water at Province Pot entrance where the team were headed, a dam was made using plastic sheeting to carry flood water past the opening. It was 3:30 p.m. on Friday before the first missing caver was brought out of the cave, with the 2 remaining cavers moving more slowly as rising water levels made traverses difficult. By Friday evening, the underground team has split into 2. The second caver was rescued at 2:30 a.m. on Saturday, and the third and final caver was brought out 2 hours later and transported to an ambulance for onward travel to the hospital. On Sunday the 5th of October, volunteers gathered to sort the kit used during the rescue at the Upper Wearfield Fell Rescue Association base in Grassington, North Yorkshire. And well done to all involved there. That is tonight's news at 10. Coming next will be the national weather and the news from wherever you are tonight. But from me and all of the News at 10 team, good night and thank you for watching.